I decided to write the book because I couldn't find anything out there that linked the research that's being done across a whole bunch of different fields like human-computer interaction and neuroaesthetics and social psychology, a whole bunch of different research fields that normally don't intersect. No one was bringing those fields together. And given that most of our lives are now spent interacting with one another online and our businesses are run online, it seems to me like it was a massive black hole where there should be some really interesting, useful stuff. So I tried to find the books. They didn't exist, so I decided to write it. So the book that you have in your hands right now, the idea for it started in 2011 when I was working at the Cube with Araceli, and she asked me to come and do an applied psychology seminar. I did do a degree in psychology, it was many years ago, and it certainly wasn't applied, it was just theoretical. So I started thinking, well, what about if we do this for online work? So I started writing a blog. The blog was interesting, hopefully people started reading it, and I thought, well, I'll write a book. Started writing the book, and a friend of mine who runs an NLP school in London read the book, or no, he read the idea for the book, and he pitched it on my behalf to someone at Pearson, which was nice, if someone can sell it for you. So off the back of that, they gave me a call, asked me to submit a proposal, which I did, and they accepted it, which was a complete surprise and very exciting. So a few months later, I thought, right, I've got till April. I gave myself a deadline. I thought, okay, I've got loads of time, sitting in the summer, writing my notes out in the garden. Got to about December, and I realised I hadn't really written anything, and I thought, oh shit, I'd better pull my finger out. So came February, and I started writing 6 to 7 hours a day for about 4 days a week. Al kept me sane, coming home and cooking and looking after me. And it was in July that it all got pretty much finished. So since then it's been, I thought that would be it and it would be a relief. And since then it's been a mad struggle to get all the infographics done and get the video done and all the rest of it. So I'm hoping that you're going to enjoy it when you finally get to read it. Why would you want to know about web psychology? What's the point of even picking up the book in the first place? Well, in order to succeed online, we have to try and influence people to take the actions that we want them to take, whatever they are, whether it's you want them to buy your book or you want them to be your follower, whatever it is that you want to do, you have to understand how people work, what makes them click at a subconscious level in order to get them to engage, to get them to care, to get them to relate to you. If you can do that on an emotional level, that's pretty much the battle won. So I've split the book. I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to the book into 3 main parts. The ideas being that to be influential online, you have to know who you're targeting. You have to then be able to communicate with those people persuasively. And then you have to be able to sell with integrity. And the last point is especially crucial. A lot of the people who I've met in the digital fields, we're in a culture of cooperation, collaboration. We support one another. We give each other feedback. The corporate world does not work that way, which is why they're having such a struggle translating into the social media arena, why they're so scared, why they're only now starting to think about social media strategies. I think in the book, there's a stat that I quote on the Fortune 500 companies, and it states that almost all of them use social media in some way or another, or they think that they should, but most of them don't even have a strategy in place as to what it means and how they use it, which is insane. They're light years behind us, literally. The final point, selling with integrity, is specifically targeted at those people who don't see the value of it yet. The idea being that social media has made us transparent, and that if you're not dealing with authenticity and with integrity, you will get taken down at some point. So for those of us who are already authentic and have integrity, we're good. For them, they're just going to have to sharpen up their game. I've never designed an infographic before. This is my first attempt. Pearson wanted to have something which is a little bit different on their bookcase, well, I suppose in their shelves, and so when we decided to present them with an idea of infographics, they said yes. I didn't realize that it would take a whole week to complete 3, and I've found newfound respect for people who do this for a living. I'm going to talk you through a couple of these things just because I think it's kind of an interesting place to start. The premise of the book is that most of the ways in which we behave online are motivated from a subconscious level. We don't know about most of the things that drive us. And with that in mind, I pulled out some of Kahneman's work, who is a behavioral economist. He believes, or he's posited, he spent 40 years researching this area with a colleague called Amos Tversky. His book has come out this year. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow. Amazing read. You should definitely read it. And he suggested that the brain can be thought of in 2 systems as a metaphor. That you have system 1, which is fast, it's emotional, it's instinctive, it's responsible for our survival. The freeze, flight and fight response. And in the West, we tend to think that that system is a little bit below us. It's a bit of an animalistic system. We don't want to identify with it. That's the thing that keeps us alive. System 2 is the conscious aspect of ourselves. That's how we identify who we are to ourselves. So we think we're conscious and we're logical and we're rational and we weigh up all our decisions. In fact, that couldn't really be further from the truth. We can only manage a small amount of information at any one time. We have a very limited amount of RAM and we have a very limited attentional capacity, which means that right now, as I'm speaking, you're probably only focusing on a few things. My voice, possibly me, the slides. You're not even thinking about your breathing rate or how your big toe feels in your left foot. But you're still breathing, you're still sitting up, and you've not died because you've stopped, your heart beating. So the idea with the book really was to found itself in that premise and to look at how different elements of our online experience interact with and influence System 1. Part of that, which I found was quite interesting, is some work done by an amazing anthropological biologist called Helen Fisher, who did some work for Match.com, which is a dating site. And her work was based on looking at neurochemicals in the brain. These are hormones in the brain. You'll have heard of some of them. So testosterone, we've all heard of that. We identify it with males. Estrogen, we identify with females. Dopamine, you may have heard of. It's the chemical that cocaine reacts with that gives us a bit of a hit. It's also one of the ways in which gamified websites and Twitter are so addictive because it pushes our dopamine button, which means that we want more, which is why I can't go more than half an hour without looking at my phone. And serotonin, if dopamine is the thing that allows us to have risk and to take novel situations into our stride, serotonin is the brake on risky behavior. She identified these 4 main archetypes, these traits that we all have in various degrees. And I thought it was such a compelling argument for looking at not only how we work at a brain level, but how we interact human to human across the world, that I found a way of putting it into the book and how it relates online. So there's some interesting stuff around that. Can you actually read any of these? Yeah, okay. Okay, I shouldn't probably linger too long into that. Moving from the individual, from the brain level, the relationship level, over into cultures. Every single platform that we use today exists within a global cultural context, which means that every single person that you interact with, whether it's in the UK, someone, your mate down the pub, your friend, your boss, someone who lives across the side of the world, we all exist within a culture, and that culture influences and produces tension with our natural temperaments. In an online context, you can see this really well if you look at how Twitter produced some interesting social shifts and quite a lot of problems in the Middle East, in Iran with the Green Revolution, and then also in the Arab uprising. Twitter was created in the West, in countries where we have low power distance, which means that there are fewer hierarchies. Those who are in an unequal position in society are less likely to accept inequality in a low power distance country. If you go somewhere like a lot of Middle Eastern countries where you have high power distance, where there's a lot of inequality and it's inbuilt within the structure of society, and into that you inject a platform that's built in the West that exists pretty laterally so that people can connect with whomever they want, and you let young people use that and they realize that they can interact in that way, you end up with a very combustible situation. And that's one of the things that I found whilst writing this book, is that we separate our online and our offline all the time. That separation is very flimsy, and it's becoming flimsier by the second. We're looking at devices now that are coming out that are becoming more gestural. So instead of tapping, with the iPhone, you give it to we'll talk about this in the car, you give it to your nephew who's 1 year old, and initially, as soon as he sees a screen, he swipes. Why? It's easy, it's natural, and you stereotype that behavior across different screens. The more instinctive and innately we respond to technology as if it were a part of our existing natural environment, the more these boundaries are going to blur, and the more we're going to think about the conflicts that can arise between the individual and their culture. And that can happen within organizations, etc. Okay, I'm talking a lot. I was not going to talk this much. So we've got global internet penetration rates at the top, which is kind of interesting, but not going to delve into that. Going to look a little bit at communicating persuasively. One thing that I want to kick off with again going back to the brain, is the concept of communication and what happens when you talk to someone or you listen to someone who can communicate really effectively, that has your full attention. What goes on? Because we're always trying to do this online, whether it's social media or on the phone or in emails. Well, researchers found this thing called neural coupling, which is basically when a speaker speaks, either in a video, in a podcast, or face-to-face, the listeners, if they're engaged with that person, the activity in the brain of the listeners reflects and mirrors that of the speaker. So essentially, you and I are having very similar experiences right now, hopefully, if you're engaged. If you're not, then we're definitely not having similar experiences. But this idea that we actually mirror one another, that we literally get on the same wavelength, is crucial to online interaction. Our favorite form of online interaction, which is the most powerful at converting people, is video. And the most popular form of communication between friends is Skype or FaceTime. Why? Because we can glean all the extra cues that we need in order to gain rapport and get on someone's wavelength. So that's the first thing. If you've got any way of communicating someone and you have a choice, make sure it's face-to-face and it's vocal and people can see you, so that then you have more of a chance of that kind of rapport. I also found some interesting gender differences, which people always kind of raise a few eyebrows about, but in the appreciation of websites. And there's also a divide between the designers and the developers. So developers will say, this functions perfectly. It does the job really well. Brilliant. My dad's a physicist. I know what this looks like. It means he uses coat hangers for everything to fix everything from the sink to the ceiling. Doesn't look pretty, but boy, does it do the job. Mum, on the other hand, much prefers an aesthetically pleasing approach. But the difference is online that we combine these two desires. So a website that we perceive as aesthetically pleasing we'll rate as more usable. So we kind of converge these two concepts together. So if you're the designer and the developer, you really need to start thinking about how you can work together to create something which is coherent. Interestingly, women and men in individualist countries have a very different response to what they find attractive in a website. So women, generally, not the women probably in this room, because we're a subset according to the neurochemical typing, and we probably don't subscribe to some of these. But in general, women prefer saturated colours in a very uncluttered, clear, white space or monochromatic space, fewer sublevels, and they tend to prefer stuff which is very direct. Men, on the other hand, and I know this from watching people go online to look at their boys' websites, like play.com and all these other things, they like flashy and interactive. It sounds like a horrible stereotype, but boys, you're really much better with animated stuff. You seem to be able to deal with it a lot better and to just take in the information that's relevant to you. These are stereotypes. In the design world, which I suspect has more high estrogen males in it, that seems not to hold. So again, it's down to the person. Okay. So selling with integrity, this accidentally ended up being the biggest chapter or the biggest part in the whole book, mainly because there's such amazing stuff that's being done by researchers around the world. One of them, if you haven't read them, read him now. In fact, read him before you've read, well, no, don't do that. I'm supposed to be selling my book. Read my book first and then read his stuff because it's amazing. Professor Robert Cialdini, an American guy, spent years doing research both in the field, posing as a marketing intern and other roles like that, to figure out how we can influence one another, how we already influence one another. And he came up with 6 very interesting, globally applicable principles. These being reciprocity. We like to give people something that's been given to us. Usually we'll give them something that's bigger than the value that we've given them. And if we don't, if we thwart that relationship, we tend to get absolutely exploited, absolutely rejected from our societies. This happens in individualist and collectivist societies. It's a very strong motivator. The other one is consistency, that once we've self-identified as having certain beliefs, so if you ask someone on a website, here, can you fill out this poll, how charitable are you? And you say, yes, I'm very charitable. And then the next question is, great, well, you won't mind giving us £2 a month for this charity. So you go, oh, right, well, I'm charitable, so actually to be consistent with my values, I've got to do it. It doesn't happen consciously, but it happens. Social proof, this is kind of the herd instinct. This is why things go viral. To an extent, you get the number up far enough, you get critical mass, people think, oh my God, this is amazing, all my friends like it, it's got to be good. It's the point at which we switch from system 2 thinking, which is the rational, where we analyze what we're receiving, to the more impulsive, automatic approach. If there's a lion coming and there's only 2 of you running, the rest of you are going to get eaten. If 5 of you are running, you know there's some shit has hit the fan and you'd better get on your bike. Well, they didn't have bikes, but you get what I mean. Okay, then liking. So we like people who are like us. That's another good way to get people to buy what you're doing or what you're saying or what you're selling. And authority is another way. If you write a book, people listen to what you have to say, and I've actually noticed that you can charge a bit more. You can actually charge something for speaking engagements as opposed to saying, yes, I will pay it for free. And scarcity, the idea that we value that which is naturally rare. It doesn't even have to be that precious, like diamonds, for instance. I'm sure some of you know about this, that there are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of diamonds in the world. How do they increase their value? They put a limit on how many can be issued per given time. It's fabricated scarcity, and we all fall for it, all of us. There's an interesting piece on charm prices as well. Have you heard of charm prices? Okay, so there's this really weird thing where when we see a price ending in the number 99 or 95 or 98, we tend to prefer that if it's a sale item, or we think that it's of better value, financially speaking. And there was a really bizarre experiment that was done in the States with it was a mail order magazine where they decided to change the prices that different people would see based on their region. And what they found was, out of the 3 different pricings, they thought people would go for the cheapest option for the same dress. They didn't. The biggest number of sales that they received was when the dress was $84.99 as opposed to £75 or £69 or £96, something like this. And they found that actually you can price things more expensively, but if you whack on a 99 at the end of it, people will think it's good value. Very bizarre. And there's another bizarre thing, which is if you go into an establishment which is expensive, you've seen this on menus where you go into a fancy place, I'm sure Shoreditch has lots of these now, and they will just give you a round number like 9 or 10 or 30 or whatever, and you go, oh yes, I'll have that one please, it's really good. Because you know that if it's not got a 0.99 or a 0.00, that there's something more precious and more valuable about it. Implicitly, we don't sort of go through this process rationally, but that's how we behave. So lots of things for you to think about.